Okay, well, welcome everybody. Sorry, Sean, my system is super slow. Oh, here it is. It just popped up. So I will call our meeting to order, 6:33, and all members are present. Mayor McNamara did mention he will be a little late and will join when he's available. But do we have any disclosures of pecuniary interest on the agenda this evening? Not seeing any. So Sean, as you just kind of mentioned regarding delegations, would we make that motion now or down in unfinished or new business? Sorry, Christina.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if we could do it right now as we go into delegations, that would be appreciated.
Okay. Well, if I could have a motion to adopt, I guess, a supplementary delegation this evening. And moved by Dan, seconded by Tanya. All in favor? Thank you very much. Sean, I might turn the floor over to you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. So as the committee will recall, one of our takeaways from our last meeting in September was exploring opportunities, and we're not leaving any leaf unturned here. We're going to look at all possibilities for providing high-speed broadband access to our underserved areas in the town of Tecumseh. So one of those things we were asked to explore was building our own network or looking at partnerships in the community to do so. So we had a recent meeting with Gray Bar and a rep from Owens Corning, who is a vendor for fiber optic cable. And they provided insights to new builds, some initiatives that they've done and seen across the province. We talked a little bit about some of the barriers or difficulties right now, challenges, I guess you would say, with getting labor and pricing and getting materials to do these builds. Which is what we've heard already in some of our other meetings, but they verified that. So with us this evening, we have Dominic Blago and Jackie Moat from Gray Bar. And they're going to do a brief overview of what they've done, what they can do, and what they have to offer the town of Tecumseh, after which we'll open it up to some questions from the committee, if there are any. Thank you.
Hi, just want to introduce Gray Bar. We're a local distributor in Windsor. We are a national national company. We have locations and branches all across Canada, but we are a distributor of fiber optic cable, and this is where I come in to the scene, is because I work closely with the Cornings, the CommScopes, anybody who is a manufacturer of outside plant fiber. So yesterday we had Corning on the call with us just to give lay of the land on and get an idea of overview of what exactly Tecumseh was wanting to do. I cover the Southwestern Ontario, so I've been working a lot with the telcos in the area. They've been putting fiber optic in little towns for 13 years now, roughly. So it's common out there now to have this done. So when you guys getting involved in this and getting it ready, it is now time that we've seen how everything is rolling, and this is where we can help out, is our expertise on how the other cities and small towns have taken this over. I really got nothing else to say about that. We're just here to help, and here to, if you guys just, I will and Dom will actually bring people together, and as you're wanting to learn more, we will get the experts here to help you with this.
So just to give you a bit of background about me, Dominic, I recently joined Gray Bar beginning of October. I come from what they would call the outside plant world, mostly on the wireless side and mostly based out of the US. For communications infrastructure, so like the first one network for AT&T and a lot of rural broadband initiatives on the US side and in Canada was mostly on the more difficult builds. So it's not something we haven't seen before. And I kind of bring a bit of expertise and technical background to the role and to Great Barn. That's kind of why Jackie looped me in on this. So Sean, Corning, Jackie and myself had a meeting, and we're kind of interested to see on how we can help you guys. I guess the initial conversation, I think the first question I asked was whether you guys were retain ownership, or if you're looking to lease out or hand over ownership after the build, which is probably the biggest question overall. We've seen this on throughout North America, specifically in Canada. So townships like Oshawa have gone through local hydro distribution. I'll try and break it down as best I can. So like the LDCs, local electrical distribution companies, Kingston, Ottawa, London, Ontario have all been utilized to start these type of initiatives. And if you guys are going to retain ownership and build out your own network, there's a couple of different ways to partner up. So if it's bringing in an engineer or partnering with a company like Fujitsu, who worked on the Dublin, Ohio project, and they're used to doing more of a smart city initiative. There's also reaching out to contractors, whether it be a Villard or Ledcor or West Tower that run fiber optic, or a Telecom. So there's a lot of different avenues. And I think once you guys decide what type of network and what the ownership and the carrier buy-in is like, we can certainly work with you and make introductions and get you guys in front of the right people that are going to help you out and save you money. So for example, if you were to go and get a consultant to just do the engineering and design your own network, you're probably looking at somewhere $250,000 just for the consultation and build out the network. Then you're looking at tendering it out to a general contractor, and then the costs just go up from there. Whereas some of these companies, if you're doing something like an EPC model, which is design build, they'll provide the engineering for you, a little less cost back. So it really depends on how you guys want to proceed and move forward with the network you're here. And I can answer any questions that you guys have when you come up to it. Even partnering with some smaller ISPs like ExploreNet. I think ATEL did some stuff in Middlesex, Start.ca, Quadro, TechSavvy did a project in Chatham, Kent, and this is all funding through the SWIFT program and the Urban Universal Broadband Fund. Sorry if I cross up my lingo. I'm used to the US. So it really depends on what you guys want and the initiative. And we're here to kind of help you go in the right direction so you guys aren't overrunning costs, an initial layout. And from the different case studies, let's say Dublin, Ohio, there's a really famous case study they did with Fujitsu, where they ran their own fiber network, future-proofed it a bit. They had parking issues because it's a tourist town. So they really utilized the funding that was available through the government or the federal government in the US to kind of modernize their parking system. So it really benefited them. A lot of work's being done on smart cities, Edmonton, Alberta, just outside of Edmonton, and the more rural areas is I don't have a lot of information about the project, but there's one going up there. Same with some developments in Washington, DC, where they're utilizing the UBF funding to start smart cities. So the program cannot just running the fibering is important and getting access to rural broadband, but while you have everything dug up, it depends on what you want to do with the project. Can really add a lot, more efficient lighting and that sort of stuff. There are the market is not great for supply chain and labor. in our area. So I'm in Cambridge, Ontario. So from Cambridge to Owen Sound to, I believe it's Innisfil. Bell used to have 26 people running fiber for them. They're down to 13. There's massive labor shortages, contractor shortages. So even if you were to, let's say, have a plan in place today, you probably wouldn't be able to get shovels in the ground for about a year, just based on getting your fiber in and finding a contractor. Some are best case scenario. That's if you're going with a tier 1 contract or product like Corning. So that's definitely kind of going that price. Jackie would have a better line on pricing for the fiber optic cable. So if you have any questions regarding that, she'd definitely be able to assist you. Sean, is there anything I forgot that we kind of covered on the other day there?
No, at a high level, that's kind of what we talked about. And like I said off the top, we're not in a position, I don't think at this point, this was kind of a long-term goal, was to look at this, but it's good to know, you know, what's happening out there. The examples you've given us, we're definitely going to look into. You had sent me the case studies, a couple of case studies for the Fujitsu products and our projects, in addition to, you know, something we've been working on already, getting carrier buy-in. If we can't do it ourselves, you know.
Carrier buy-in is the biggest. I'm a sales guy by name. Like I am, that's what I do. I'm a sales guy. But you know, short term, I'm a technical sales guy, but I'm a sales guy. So the picture you're always going to hear is, you know, if you retain ownership, you can lease out to space to the ISPs, which is correct if there's interest in there. So a company starting off from scratch and going out and selling them to you, I can put you in contact with people. I'm not a leasing guy, but I know the people that are involved. From my point of view in the cities that I've been involved in the rural communities, I would rather, if it were me, I would rather partner with a company that's got the connections already. Somebody like Fujitsu. You're not running out. They'll come and do a feasibility study. They'll come and do a network plan for you guys at all the fraction of the cost. Of course, they're going to want your business in the future if you ever do roll out, but they're going to save you a whole pile of money, an upfront cost, and give you a real direct plan and an ability to kind of move forward without a lot of overhead cost. And that's kind of where I would go with it. Same with the EPC model. But carrier buy-in is the hardest avenue. So maybe reaching out to somebody like a really pro-Canadian, pro-small town, pro-rural company like ExploreNet, where you'll probably get a lot more face time with them than you would with the Bell and Rogers. And that's just to be honest with you, and Cogeco's and Shaw's. Not that they're not there, and Bell has been involved in some of the rural funding, but it depends on what they're already directed to. So just to give you kind of a hint of the direction of how the market reacts, and the best business model for you guys. So it's really up to you, and I can steer you and make the connections and then introduce you to whoever you might have an interest in, and be like, all you have to do is make a phone call and say, hey, Dom, do you have a number for somebody exploring that, or etc. Does anybody have any questions? I know I talk fast and I'm trying to go through a lot because they're kind of complicated networks. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I'll open the floor. Go ahead, Councillor Jobin.
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. Well, thanks, Dominic. So I just wrote down a couple of your comments. So it's 250,000 just for an initial meeting to discuss the plan.
No. That's
Oh.
for like to consult with an engineer who's going to develop a plan and a layout and basically get you ready to go out to
shop
contractors, to shop. So that's to develop your network. I mean, there's a lot into it, right? Like if you're running that much fiber and producing a ring, tying into the existing infrastructure. So that's what I mean. But that's kind of where you'd start. Like right now, you've got an idea. To go from idea to the ability to tender. If you were going to bring in a consultant engineer, that's generally what they would charge you for developing a fiber optic ring.
Okay, thank you.
Dan?
Mr. Chair, thanks, Dominic. I guess what I wanted to understand from you is what goes into that engineering plan. I guess what's the output of that?
Well, they're gonna find the bandwidth and tap into it, like Bell, Rogers, whoever has available bandwidth. They're going to basically run the main trunk, and then all your offshoots. So you need your handholds, your enclosures.
And feel free to be specific. I have a background in networking, and this is why
Oh, okay, yeah. So that's essentially what they're going to
I'm
do.
kind of inquiring about that.
So it's really tying right out to the point, and then the 250 is just a ballpark estimate of what someone would cost you, and engineering an actual municipal fiber owned ring.
I see.
Do you have any more to add? She's more on the inside plan as well. So
I know.
Oh, yeah, what I was going to say with the engineering part, because to build and design this network, every subdivision, you're going to have a little breakout cabinet. So they will figure it out where the best place is to plot them, how many nodes is going to be required, how many fibers to go into that subdivision will be required. So they will do a lot of the legwork for you, and then design it so you, because there's a lot of pieces that go with this, as Dom had mentioned. There's the manholes, there's the cable, there's the conduit, there's the demarcation points, the nodes. And so this way, if you have like an engineering company, they will plot everything for you out on the maps. Because I'm looking at your maps here, and you have 3 high areas already that have high speed. So are they joined together? The 3 areas that you have already?
No,
Old Castle, Tecumseh, and then there's that little.
Yeah, those maps are, sorry, through your, Mr. Chair, to Jackie, those maps are just general maps, and it'd be different vendors that would be involved in that coverage, those coverage areas.
Okay.
they'd be tying in. Did we kind of answer your question there, or are you still looking for more?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think what is still unclear to me is we have local providers such as MNSI who routinely do this, and they've gotten into Old Castle, they've gotten into many neighborhoods and expanded their fiber network. Which point I'm kind of wondering if with every such attempt, they go out and spend $250,000. And I find that
they'll have their own house engineering staff and fiber, like it's a different breed of cat, right? Like if I'm talking to someone like MNSI, they know exactly what they're doing. They'll send me a list of materials and we'll do a takeoff, right? So they wouldn't necessarily have a consultant, but to come in fresh. See, I'm still kind of at a basis, right? I just don't know exactly what type of, like, if you're tying in and working with MNSI and some of the local distributors, and be like, hey, listen, what can we do to promote you guys to run another 8 kilometers of cable, or 200 kilometers of cable, is a lot different than going into basically tying off, going in and off a main line and then running your own ring, and then leasing out the space. Completely different. So when I'm talking from like a high level. So yeah, they wouldn't be spending $250,000. They would just do it themselves. But from someone who's never run a network or has limited exposure, that's what I'm talking from scratch. running exactly what you guys need. So then that was in more of a reference to independent network. Is that a bit more clear? Or is you, am
I think I'm kind of hearing if we didn't have anything and we were to go ahead and you know, build an engineering plan from scratch
Yeah.
to service the entire community, you know, hiring consultant and building those plans and getting that in place. So
yeah, that's kind of what I'm going at. So that's at a, yeah, exactly. I mean, I can send Sean some consultants that would be interested, and they might have a different take, but from what I've seen from starting from scratch. But if MSI, if you have some carriers that have already, like from the map, it looks like you have some high density areas, it might just be a funding issue for them to try and promote them to go into some different areas and expand the network. So that might be something for you guys to explore as well.
okay. Aldo.
Sorry, my computer wasn't cooperating. I apologize, the gentleman's name who was just speaking there.
Dominic?
There you are. Do you have any case studies where a community has done the groundwork to service their rural customers? Because we already have service in the major already developed areas. We're trying to get service out to those that don't have it at a high speed. So a case study where, you know, a town took the initiative to do the fiber in a rural area, but then have it be sold back or leased back to vendors, not just because I know they cherry pick, right? They're going to go in and do
Exactly.
they're going to do the subdivisions and not do the concession roads. So do you have a case study where that was successful, where someone serviced a rural area and it was sold back or leased back to vendors?
I do in the US, but it's all been point to point because that's where I come from, the wireless industry. Let me do some digging and send something over to Sean, see if I can't find a really definitive case study for you guys. There are, I just can't think of one in Canada right now. I know a lot of the LDCs, so your local distribution companies, which would be anyone or, pardon me?
Gosfield would be one.
LDCs, right? So yeah, Gosfield, but anyone utilities.
Yeah.
I believe they did one with the city of Windsor. So a lot of local utilities are running a private network and then working with municipalities as well. But let me see if I can find a case study where a municipality actually built the rural infrastructure and leased it back to a company to see if it's been successful.
Yeah, because I just don't see the utility in piggybacking on something that's already there. We're trying to fill a void. So if we sort of do the work for them, because they're not going to get to the rural communities till the very end because their return on investment isn't the same. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep.
No problem.
Mark.
Oh, I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to acknowledge that Blue Water Power in Sarnia did just that. They developed a network to service certain parts of the city and have run that. The city did not own it though. That was just an entity of Blue Water Power.
Oshawa PUC is doing the same thing. Because the utilities want to monitor their and this is from a distribution, not like a Hydro One level, but from a distributor, because they want to monitor the electrical, they're running the private networks and then basically building that infrastructure for rural areas, and then as a means to kind of affect the CapEx. So they're building in conjunction with municipalities. If it makes sense.
Any other questions for Dominic or Jackie? And sorry, Mayor McNamara, I know you kind of came in late. Jackie and Dominic are both from Gray Bar, so they were just providing some information for us about how they've worked in the past with municipalities, and what they can do and how they can help should we want to go down the road of building out our own network. Dan, did you have another question?
Yes, I did. I was wondering through you, Mr. Chair, if our guests today have any case studies related to broadband over power lines, since we are talking about hydro companies having served rural areas. I know that's a popular approach in the US. I'm not sure how popular that is in Canada, and if they have any insight into the appetite of the hydro companies to engage in such a project.
Oshawa PUC and Kingston is starting this summer. Kingston Utilities. I can't get you any information on that because it's still being worked out in contract talks. And then there's 2 other ones that I'll be involved in this summer as well, that haven't been released yet. But I will get you some case studies on that.
Okay, thank you.
We'll just
Any
send
other-
those to Sean, and Sean can distribute to the committee. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, and London Hydro as well. Did another one. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Sean, did you have anything further?
No, we're just ticking a box here on our unfinished business as far as going it on our own and what that would kind of look like. So just beginning those talks, and this was bringing back some of the research and some of the conversations we've had since our last meeting. So that was thank Dominic and Jackie for joining us with this information this evening.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having us, and have a good night.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes. You guys have a
Bye-bye.
good one. Thanks for having us.
We'll move on to communications, and we have 4 items on the agenda. If we can have a motion just to accept those items. Moved by Councillor Jobin, seconded by Dan. All in favor? And any questions or comments regarding any of the letters that we received? Okay, yep, Sean and Councillor Jobin.
I guess for the town of Essex, the letter, is that something, Christina, that went to a regular council meeting for support already? It's just provided here for information. We've endorsed that one already.
Yes, so through you, Mr. Chair, correct. This was presented previously at a regular council meeting and forwarded to the committee for sharing of information.
And then if I can, Mr. Chair, number 3, there's new information that came out in November regarding speeding up the approval process for builds throughout Ontario. And there's quite a guideline that was, I don't know if it's part of that attachment, but quite a guideline for vendors to follow and for the province to recognize as far as the approval piece that's required to put in these builds. So when we get to that phase, that should be useful. And the last one, that was some data received back from Grant Street, who was at our first meeting regarding our speed test campaign, and I'll speak more to that under unfinished business.
Yep. Okay. I guess we don't have any reports, so if there's no questions, we can just jump into unfinished business.
If I may, Mr.
Oh,
Chair.
yes.
Just on item 3, I'm quite familiar because of my involvement with SWIFT. As you know, we're doing a county project in Stony Point. And in that area, that's about a $2.2 million piece. I was listening with, with curiosity in terms of, utilities and even municipalities and startups and that. It is extremely expensive, and especially in the rural area. I can tell you, even in, and I'll share with you in terms of the 4 billion and what the province has now submitted through Investment Ontario, Infrastructure Ontario, sorry, that are going to be it's a Crown Corporation that is going to manage the $4 billion expansion of broadband across the province of Ontario. There are certain areas within the community that even the subsidies that's high for one house is $60,000, and so it's a very expensive. I know even from our experience with SWIFT, the subsidy was ranging anywhere between $7,000 to about $20,000 per household, and so it's not a cheap venture for municipalities to get into, and that's why many of them are not involved in it. Number one, the NSIP program that the province announced, there's blocks of monies, and I'll just forget about the rest of the province. I'm just going to do Southwestern Ontario, because that's where I'm involved with the Western Ontario Wards Caucus. They've dedicated tranches of money for each and every of those counties, and most of it is fiber, but then there's a mix of wireless and so forth. There's some issues that we've picked up through our executive director, who is also Barry Fields, who is very, very, very knowledgeable in this. To break that down, each county is getting between the highest 80 million to the low 30s millions for their respective counties. County of Essex has been allocated 37 million. But here's part of the problem as well, is that what they're doing basically is they've set out for proposals to the industry to bid, and it's kind of a reverse bid. And they're saying, okay, we're now allocating X number of dollars for this. Can you bid on it? And the tranches are pretty big. You talk 37 million. It's going to be difficult for MNSI to put a bid in. Not difficult for the Bells or the Rogers of the world. And so they're going to be eliminating a lot of the small players because it's just too much money. I know that as a chair of SWIFT and talking to the minister, I said, look, you need to break down the tranches of money to each of them so it's manageable, to make sure that the small and medium-sized ISPs can bid on it, like the MNSIs and the tech savvies and so forth, which through the SWIFT program has been very successful. 60% of all 96 contracts that have been allocated for SWIFT has been allocated to small and medium ISPs. In other words, local companies, which also in the end result, it's not only the cost of connecting, but it's also the cost of maintaining and what your fees are going to be in it. So the more competition, the better it is. And so we're waiting now to see if these companies will bid. And the fear that I have, even with that money, there might be some that will just not even bother bidding. A good example, it has Wellington County, 85 million. The fear is that nobody is going to bid on it. Too much of a risk. The other issue as well is that the ISPs under the SWIFT model and Eastern Ontario model there was a contributory factor of the ISPs. How much are you willing to put in? And so the province, the federal government, and the ISP And so we were able to leverage a fair amount of money. And so SWIFT, the total package is about 290 million for 15 counties. That's what we're putting into the certainly into the picture. I mean, I hate to say, especially the folks like Aldo or Dan, you guys are, and even Tanya, be patient, wait, and see how this thing's going to evolve. Going into this, when I first got the information from the government, I was very excited. 37 million for Essex County, and they're looking at all fiber. And then the UBS federal monies, 20 million going to PD Island, a double trunk of fiber going to the island. You're saying, wow, that should cover our bases. But I'm not 100% convinced now in terms of how IO is approaching this thing. And so I guess the proof's going to be in the pudding come January, February, when the RFPs come in and to see who's bid on them. And there might be one. It could be Bell that's going to take care of all of us. Or it could be Rogers, or it could be Cogeco. And to my disappointment, it takes out a lot of the smaller players in the ISPs certainly into that equation. On the other fact is the initial infrastructure, in particular in the rural areas that it's to build on, extremely expensive. You can see 37 million just for what's left in the mapping. And in the other, what IO as well, I want to share with you too, is they're using a lot of the mapping, which is outdated. And we found redundancies even in our own projects that we put in, and they're still using the old CRTC mapping. And that's how they dictated, this is how much we're going to spend in the various communities. So within the next 2 or 3 months, we'll have a better idea in terms of where we stand as a county. At first brush, 37 million, mostly fiber, wonderful. And that should take care of business. I'm not so sure right now in terms of who's going to bid, how many are going to bid. That is left to the ISPs that are certainly out there. And what I'm afraid is a lot of those ISPs are going to pick and choose in other words, cherry pick the best of the best and not get involved in the others. And with some of the tranches so big, the small players, it's going to exclude them. Not because they don't want to be part of it. It's just that the tranches are too big. And so obviously we're going to need to have some sort of communications councils, all our councils and counties to really push the government's button. I think they're worried about an election coming in June. They want to make it sound really nice. They're putting $4 billion out there for the province, but I think there's going to be some bumps in the road, some pretty big bumps. So I don't want to discourage you guys. That's not my point, but I want to kind of temper what we can do and what we can't do, and who's paying and how it's it's going to be put in place. And I think what I would like to do, Mr. Chair, is our next meeting that I would love to have Barry Fields address our committee. He's an expert, and he's the one that actually helped build the locally the successful UBS project for PD Island. And he understands and he has a great sense of how this can work and what it can't, with what's going to be difficult. And so that would be my suggestion. to you, Mr. Chair, that we extend an invitation to Barry to address our committee. And you guys can fire away all the questions that you can. And he can give you a pretty good perspective of how broadband's going, how broadband should be expanded, and how broadband could be expanded.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, that we extend that. And, we should have maybe put Mayor McNamara as a delegation for us this evening, but I guess, does anybody have any questions for the mayor on any of the information he just shared? Darren.
Yes, first of all, congratulations, Mr. Mayor, on that announcement made this week on the Stony Point thing. I know we carried it on the air and had you on the radio earlier this week. So it's a big announcement and it's great. 945 homes being serviced now through SWIFT. The one question I had is, so this 37 million being allocated to Essex County, are you just suggesting that it's going to be put up for a proposal, that they are looking one ISP, one person, one proposal is going to do the entire $37 million project, as opposed to saying, we're going to look for somebody that's willing to do the former Sandwich South, and we're going to look for somebody who's willing to do the Colchester area or whatever, like various areas? Or you're saying the challenge is going to be finding an ISP or somebody willing to bid on the whole project as one entire project?
Well, somewhat like that. Maybe I didn't explain myself properly. I mean, the idea would be wonderful if we had 10 ISPs bid on the project. And the problem is the way the government is doing it is a reverse. They're saying, here's the pot of money. So who's going to win the pot? And that's where I think it's a huge mistake. What SWIFT basically brought to the attention of the minister is that the tranches shouldn't be any more than 10 million, and so that it gives others opportunities to bid on it. I mean, fiber's fiber. At the end of the day, it's all interconnected. I mean, we have it into the urban areas. You can have Bell, Cogeco, MNSI, pick your poison, so to speak. Pick the best deal for you. And so I think that's a critical piece. So when you put large amounts of money, you're talking billions of dollars here, but when you're talking 40 million to 80 million, the small player, that's a huge risk, and they probably can't even get a bond, to cover their their construction costs and so forth. So it's very difficult. And we made that point very clear to the minister, is that you should open this up to as many ISPs as possible for competition. And when you might get some of the big players that'll look at Wellington and they'll say, nah, I don't want to touch them, 85 million. But I like the Essex one. So, they're all built here or bid here. One of them will get the bid. So I think there's some issues, and I'm hoping that, well, I shouldn't say I'm hoping. I don't want to be in a position for like Barry to say to the minister after all of the meetings he's had with her and basically say, well, I told you so. And so, we started out with extremely high, excitement to somebody just throwing cold water on us. And so we're hoping that it'll be able to be salvageable down the road. But it's like us going for a tender. It is basically saying, I got X number, I got 20 million, and can you do this project? It's just go out there and say it's $20 million. Well, that people are going to bid 20 million because even though the project, they can do it for 16 million. And so that approach, I think, is wrong. And I think it's investment or Infrastructure Ontario they're accustomed to big projects, like the bridge, like, you know, the expansions of 401 and the expansion of, you know, 412 and 413 and those billion-dollar projects. To drill down to smaller projects, I don't think that they really get it. But yeah, you know, to your point, could be just one person bidding on it.
Dan, you had a question?
It did, I guess, through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for Mayor McNamara for sharing some insight into this. I am assuming that when we're talking about the minister, it's the ISED minister that's involved in this these conversations. And what I'm not necessarily grasping here to a full extent is these 37 million, how are these earmarked? How are these allocated? Is this just a single bid, single area, one amount, or is this something that could be divvied up in some way, for lack of better terminology?
There, basically, Sean, I'm going to get you the map. I'll get you the map of the county. And what it shows is that, you know, all the good news is in the bid, it's all fiber. That's good news. 37 million basically are saying, according to their engineers, the government that is 37 million. That's the cost to connect our communities. So here's 37 million. We want you to do this in our community. So bid on it. So it's almost like a reverse tender, reverse bid. And so the Kojikos and the Bells and the whoever's are going to look at that and they'll say, yeah, I can do it for 37 million. So they bid on it. But somebody might turn around and say, I can do it for 32. And that's what the government is hoping, is that somebody's got, you know, we've got this amount of money. And then if there was 10 bidders, I'm hoping it goes like, you know, 35, 32, 29, 28 or whatever. And then then we'll give it to you. But that, you know, we're not building a road here. And so that's the difficult part, because there's a lot of roadblocks, a lot of issues. And I can tell you, you know, to bring fiber to a home, there's a reason why they've done the urban centers first. And they're basically really not wanting to touch the rural areas because of the cost. And so there has to be a subsidy. And when you just blanket give a pile of money, then I believe that the ISPs should contribute money. They should be putting money in this. And I'm a doubting Thomas here that they're not going to do that. They're going to bid and hopefully they get X number of dollars and they're going to put it out, and then they'll build. And do you really know if you got value for money? I'd be curious to see what the Auditor General of the province of Ontario will say on value for audit on this. And you know, I really have my doubts that this is the deliverable that they think the government's going to get, that full value for their bid. But I mean, the good news is they've got a lot of money. I just don't think they're spending it wisely.
Yeah, Dan?
Go ahead, Dan.
Elementary? Yeah.
For you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that explanation, Mayor McNamara. I'm quite disappointed to see that there's really no, and quite shocked to see that there's really no accountability or no conditions put on these types of bids. Right? I mean, one ought to think that if this amount of money is divvied up, right, for a sole purpose of connecting entire county, right, such as ours, then there be some conditions associated with it. Some, yeah.
Yeah, and I want to add too that there are some counties that for whatever reason, they got this huge amount of money and then there's a whole section of their county is wireless. And we're saying, why? So even in the wardens now, all of them that I've spoken to, some of them are at the beginning were really upset. And I know the warden of Wellington County who lives in Minto, they're not getting one iota of fiber or wireless in the town of Minto or the village of Minto, but the county is getting $87 million. So, you know, once you see the maps, that was one of the reasons why they wouldn't allow us at the beginning to show folks like yourself. You know, Chatham-Kent's getting a fair amount of wireless versus fiber in theirs. We're fortunate enough, and I don't know why, you know, and ours is more fiber. So when you can see when the ISPs are going to bid, well, you know, wireless is much cheaper. And so here's the tranche of money. And yeah, we could do that for that, of course. And, you know, that's a difference with bait on the RFP saying you need to do fiber. And this is the amount of money we've got and so forth. So I think there will be some growing pains here for sure.
And you said that, Mayor, those bids are closing like Q1 next year? Or the RFP? Yep.
Yeah, they're gonna want to see who's bidding on those specific contracts. But I can, you know, anybody that is speaking to the industry, I'm sure that, you know, there's going to be some cherry picking, absolutely. I can tell you the Eastern Ontario wardens are not very pleased. And then Northern Ontario, they have their group and they're not very happy. So I guess maybe the government figures if you know, if they're not all happy or unhappy, then it must be a good thing. But you know, all I can say is to be patient to see who bids and what the bid's going to be. But we're not going to have the opportunity of having you know, multiple ISPs because the tranches are too big.
Yep. Aldo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the mayor, just and I apologize if this was touched on in previous sessions, but so the government is allotting money for these services to be installed. And let's say, for example, Bell wins the contract. They put the fiber in the ground. That's what they're paid for. But who owns the fiber after that? Who maintains it? And are they in a buyback situation? How does that all work?
Well, they put the fiber in. It'll be owned by Bell. It's no different than I got Bell, I got Cogeco, I got MNSI coming to my house, and so they own it.
We pay for it, and they own it.
Well, in essence, we are paying for it because it's all taxpayers' money.
Interesting.
Because even the SWIFT project, like for us, as we maintain, like for example, use Lighthouse Cove. SWIFT will own that project for 7 years, and then it's not ours. So I can't answer to say, is it in the same, you know, because they are putting all of the, you know, they're doing the work, putting the fiber in and so forth, and they get responsible for it, like we are for 7 years. I mean, for us, it's a bit of an easy thing because we did have skin in the game, or we do have skin in the game. So is the federal government, provincial government. And but this one is a bit different.
And Mayor, who is the ISP putting in that infrastructure in Lighthouse Cove?
Tech savvy.
Okay. Yeah. And Dan, did I see you had another question?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, for the mayor, would it make sense to petition the government about this process in any way, shape, or form? Would that yield any successful results at this juncture, or is that a fruitless effort, you think?
I missed the first part of your question, Dan.
Would it make sense for us as a township to petition the government about the whole bidding process, about the obvious glaring issues?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've already sent one as the county.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I think this committee should do that. Absolutely.
Mr. Chair, then I would like to put forth the motion that that we do that.
Sure, and maybe, and Mayor, I'm thinking, is it appropriate for us to reference the county's letter that, you know, there and provide our support there, or would we draft our own?
We should do our own, and the more the merrier, you know, the more municipalities and others, because yeah, the competition is not going to be there the way it should be, and they're excluding, and that's mind-boggling, because the government's strength is in rural Ontario, and they're shutting out you know, those small operators, you know, the tech savvies of the world, the MNSI, and others. I mean, they're basically, there's only a handful of folks, and I think I've got to give the Bells of the world a lot of credit. They did a lot of lobbying on this. But so if you want, I can have a conversation with both Sean and Marg, and what I can do is get the right verbiage in terms of the letter, and then we can certainly extend that to the members of the committee, just to get your eyes on it, and then we can ship this off, or we can do it another way, where the committee could recommend that council, and I think council should do it anyway, but council could, on behalf of the committee, send a letter, you know, through us. So either way, I think it's certainly to send a message, because we're having a, you know, the Western Ontario Wards Caucus did the same thing. They're all disappointed, and we've all been told, write letters.
Well, and maybe I'll ask Christina, or maybe our CAO, would there be enough time for the committee to direct something like that to council, and for us to address that at our next meeting on the 14th, which is 6 days away? Would there be enough time for that? Or would it be something that would make the agenda in January?
I'd say try to do it for December if we can.
If I could, through you, Mr. Chair, in response to your question, I think let's see, the agenda goes out tomorrow, but it could go on as a late item in the form of a motion from, you know, perhaps yourself and Councillor Jobin. And that way it would be considered within the rules, certainly considered on December 14th.
Okay. Councillor Jobin, are you okay with that?
Yes, for sure. So now, would it be, this letter we're talking about is similar to the same format that the Essex letter was sent out? Or are we going to get into more detail about the funding? Because I feel like we've already sent something to Doug Ford
No,
about.
I think it's more of the format. It's
Have the bidding process.
Yeah, I mean, I think between the government and us and the rest, we're all on the same page in terms of saying we need broadband. we're okay there. And, but it's how it's being delivered. I mean, at the end of the day, it's our tax dollars, and are we getting the value that we should be? And who are we excluding, you know, from the bidding process? I can guarantee you, Tech Savvy and the rest of them, we've even through Barry's talked to them. They are not bidding. They can't. They just it's putting all your, you know, it's all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, and so forth. If it's more manageable in smaller tranches, then it creates an ability for the small and medium players to be in the game. Well, right now, they've been excluded.
Okay, well, I'm certainly fine with that. And if the committee, Darren?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. That was one of the suggestions I was going to make, is that the committee was formed as an advisory committee to advise the council what we would recommend. So I think that makes the most sense for us to advise council that we'd like the letter sent. I just wanted to kind of clarify if there is a way to, what we're asking in the letter. We're asking for, I guess, smaller pieces. Instead of one giant pie, we want that allocated money to be cut up into smaller manageable pieces for local ISPs to be able to bid on specific projects within the county instead of the county as a whole. Is that what I'm understanding?
Pretty much. And what I'll do is our communications director from the Western Ontario Awards Caucus, what I'll do with their permission, and that if I can get their drafted letter, and then we can tailor it to us. With no sense reinventing the wheel. So I'll do that tomorrow.
Okay. Mark?
Just in terms of logistics, Chair, if we can work with the mayor and his information, as well as the notes that Christina is taking from today's meeting to draft something up, we can send it around to the Rural Broadband Committee, I think, to just basically allow them to see it before it goes onto the agenda, with if that is direction that you would like us to take.
Yeah, I think that's good.
That's fair.
Okay. Sean, was there anything else in unfinished business that you might like to discuss or address?
Yes, your chair, Mr. Chair. Some of my thunder has been stolen, but that's okay. I'll go over some of the items here now. So at our last meeting, we had talked about the zero speed test. So the outcome of those tests throughout the municipality. So as I had noted in the agenda, that we had about 1,200 tests throughout the municipality. This map might be a little hard to see, but it's kind of what we thought as far as the areas go with connectivity. The few anomalies that you note on here are, if you drill down into them, it looks like they're using a high-speed LTE hub or something like that. For the most part, it's the ExploreNets and WaveDirects in the south end. This number of dots here is the center of the NOR 1KO postal code. So if somebody didn't move their dot on the map to their house, all the dots ended up in this spot. So there's kind of a bunch of tests that ended up on one specific location, which was actually the center of the postal code. So we took this information in our GIS group, transferred that to a map that also lined up with where we know connectivity is now from other service providers such as Cogeco, MNSI, Bell. So in the green is what we're calling serviced areas. So the Tecumseh wards 1, 2, 3, part of 4, all the way down the 12th. Zoom in here a bit for you. And then the old Castle Hamlet, obviously, with a little branch out on County Road 46, with those industries that are found there. They'll have some version of a local ISP with connected high-speed internet. And then a little bit in Maidstone where Cogeco had lit up the Maidstone Village about 3 or 4 years ago. So when we look at the balance of the town that we're talking about, that we're calling underserved, I have had conversations with Barry and Melissa at Swift to determine what's underserved, what's served. You still can have wireless and be deemed served, but it has to be a consistent bandwidth of the 50-10. And then other people I talk to say even that 50-10 measurement is antiquated in this day and age. So we're going to go based on the premise with those conversations with Swift that I've had, in addition to some analysis we've done here. So if we look at the balance of the town that is not in a served area, here's the breakdown of commercial buildings, institutional buildings, places of worship, rec buildings, and then residential, which makes up the bulk of it. And I'll circulate this. This is fresh off the press, so I'll circulate this to the committee. But if you zoom in a little tighter, up and down the concessions, all the little red specks are buildings or possible customers for a future ISP. Now, when you look at, okay, there they are, how do we reach them? What's it going to take to reach them? If you look at the kilometers of roads we're talking about, this is very high end. I think if I look at this a little closer today, provincial highways, I think that's including the 401. So we'd knock off 10 kilometers there. Obviously the county roads that are the boundary roads for the municipality, there might be some sharing there. So even if we're at 100 kilometers at $100 a meter to install fiber, this is worst case scenario. You know, that's $10 million. So when we hear 37 million to do what we want to do, fiber to the door, very rough estimates at this point. You know, we're at a $10 million project to reach everybody, to reach every dot on the map. So that was kind of the culmination of the CIRA project, the data we had in, speaking with local ISPs, plugging their maps in to come up with some internal analysis of where we're at as far as what is underserved in Tecumseh. And again, this is, as the mayor alluded to, this is a regional issue. It's not just a Tecumseh issue, but anybody I talk to, the more groundwork and barriers that we can drop, that elevates our profile for grant opportunities. If we're working with ISPs already, so if they're going out to get funding, it elevates our profile with them that we're open for business and we are doing the due diligence and work on behalf of our ratepayers to get them high-speed access in Tecumseh. So that was for the CIRA speed test. So I'll stop it right there. If there's any questions on that bullet, I'll take those now.
Dan has a question.
To you, Mr. Chair, for Sean, what ISPs have been participating in these conversations so far?
I'll leave it right now local. So some we've mentioned tonight, right?
Okay.
The ones that are already in the area, building off of their networks, right?
Okay, thank you.
I really like that map, Sean, just showing
Yeah,
what's served, what's
literally-
unserved. I'm
Correct.
surprised that the 12th is serviced all the way to the end. I used to live on the 12th and there's not much down there. But you know, Bell or Cogeco could have ran all the way down. So
it's been a work in progress. And we wanted to get it as close to the meeting date as possible to come up with that. So we've been working on that in the last week to try and do some analysis. I'll circulate that after me. I didn't have it ready in time to circulate with the agenda, but for sure the committee will get it as it was just finalized today. I'm going to tweak the 401 too and make sure the 401 is not included in that provincial highway legend, part of the legend. So moving on to unfinished business, the Ontario Hydro site. So as you recall, we had that tower in the south end of Lakeshore, which is very close to Ward 5 and a lot of the area we're talking about here on that previous map. A lot of back and forth with Ontario Hydro. So this afternoon, I did get quite an extensive email from the powers to be at Ontario Hydro with a lot of good information on what it would take to lease space on that tower. As we talked about at previous meetings with the drone footage and the location and the possible coverage we'd have based on the height It's one of the highest towers in that section of the county. So it's not just picking up possible Tecumseh residents and businesses. It'd be Lakeshore, Essex, and the area. So I'm going to take that. I kept hearing that the lease payments to be on that tower were a non-starter for some of the ISPs that I have talked to in recent months, but getting that information today, I think it's a little more palatable than I thought it was going to be as far as dollars to be on that tower for an annual fee. There's the initial investment of, and I think Darren talked about this last meeting about the design, the wind loading of antennas you put up there. You know, the tower is going on 50 plus years old. Is it structurally sound to support the kind of antennas we envision to be up there to help supply and support the areas we're talking about? So that information was fresh today from Ontario Hydro, and we'll have more information on that at our next meeting for sure.
Well, that's promising.
Any questions on that? That's
Any
this would be point to multi-point wireless, like the Wave Directs and the Xplornets, like that kind of technology. They do have towers in the area, but nowhere near the elevation or the elevation that we're talking about here at this site. So next on our list was SWIFT. So the mayor had already talked about some of the new announcements, I guess you'd say, with SWIFT. Stony Point came on stream, and those, you know, if we have 700 houses over X kilometers, Stony Point was a nice little project where they had 700 houses in a more of a confined space. So the business case makes sense there. So yeah, speaking with Barry, Melissa at SWIFT about the definition of served and underserved, as far as throwing away those old maps and coming up with our new maps with boots on the ground and actual supportable data that we've come up with and justifiable data. I think we can use that to reduce the barriers that the ISPs have of getting into these areas. Not to say we're going to cover every house, but if we can get, you know, up over 80–90% at the end of the day, if that's our target, then whatever we can do to do due diligence by the town on behalf of our ratepayers.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, I
Although-
think.
Yep, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. For Sean, you had mentioned that the cost of, I'm jumping back a few points here, just running some numbers through my head. So Mayor McNamara has basically said that the smaller vendors are not going to be able to compete with this $37 million bid. You said that to service or to lay fiber in the underserviced areas is 10 million. So if you were to approach, and this may be way out in left field and I apologize if it is, but if you were to approach a local vendor or the smaller vendors and say, look, we'll give you exclusivity on the area. It would cost you, and I assume it would cost them the same that it would cost us to lay. It would cost you $10 million to eventually get out and service where you're eventually going to get 10 years from now when you're done servicing all the easy picking subdivisions. We'll put in 5 million, you put in 5 million, but it's your contract. So we say 5 million, they say 5 million, but it gets done a whole lot sooner than it would when they're done laying it in the subdivision, and they'd service the rural areas much sooner.
Yeah, so in speaking with a couple of the ISPs that we're talking about here tonight, we come up with the cost, trying to eliminate barriers. We don't come up with the cost, we come up with an estimate of what it would cost. So I've heard anywhere from $40 a meter to $170 a meter. And a lot of that is, most of that, when I say that, that's plowing it or running it underground, not getting into the overhead piece with trying to rent space on poles. So you're using that ballpark figure, then they're going to take their business case and analyze the number of customers in that 100 kilometer area. So it's going to cost this. They're going to do with their ROI and their investment, and all their accountants and number crunchers are going to analyze all of that and come up with the gap. And then the big question at the end of the day is, how do we fund that gap, or who funds that gap? And that's where the SWIFTs come in, the infrastructure, Connect Ontario, that kind of thing comes in. So who that vendor is, based on what the mayor's talked about earlier in the meeting, it might not be the local guys, but if we get more people to voice the concerns about the big tranche and not bite, divvying this up into bite-sized pieces for projects like we're talking about here tonight, to make it more palatable and affordable. But yeah, it's I think the mayor used a number of 60,000 to reach a house that's, one or two on a concession. That's a lot of money for one or two, and it's a hard business case for anybody to go on their own to do that.
Well, all I'm saying though, and that, Sean, is what IO is proposing, and we're saying you're out of your mind, and then for us, on average, all of our project was about 4,500. Because if you look at 290 million, and our target was 50,000 homes. And at the very beginning, it was about 250. We were able to, add dollars. And we were fortunate enough that we were able to add another 15,000 premises passed and X number of kilometers beyond. The way the bidding process is set up now, it's pretty hard to achieve that. And because all of a sudden, here's a pot of money and there's no contribution needed from the ISPs. I think that's a huge mistake by the, we try to tell them, but on average, 20,000 in certain areas, that was the, because, we had to deal with crossing rivers and tribal lands, indigenous properties, all of this other stuff. That's why they was driving some of the cost up. This is why I was saying earlier, the auditor general is going to say 60,000. Okay, let's have a look at this. And it just doesn't make any sense. But the numbers are quite high. And the deeper we get into, as you alluded to, into a concession, the higher the subsidies required and so forth. So that's why I firmly believe that what they're doing is, in many instances, the government's leaving money on the table by not having the ISPs, be a little bit more attentive. Because what we did with our program is the county put X number in. We said, okay, we're going to put X in, and the province and the feds are putting X in. So we want the ISP. How much are you guys prepared to put in? And they put in a fair amount. I'll give them that. But in the same token, they built their network or networks with subsidized dollars. Even though they put in X in, they were able to build it. And so, I'm sitting there now thinking, now you're going to get access to $4 billion in the province of Ontario, and you don't have to put anything in it.
Any other questions for Sean? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Aldo.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the mayor. You've had obviously numerous conversations with these ISPs. If it wasn't for the subsidy dollars going out there, clearly the business model doesn't make sense to run fiber out to a concession that's got 4 homes on it. If the subsidized dollars weren't there, are they even planning on going out there, or is that just going to be an area they plan to abandon and not go for?
No, I can give you some examples where we had to press the button on and I won't name the ISPs, but where they actually missed a street or a concession, and we said, well, no, you got to go down and you've got to extend this. And they said, well, no, it's going to cost us X, and we got to. Too bad. That was in the bidding process and so forth. You will do it, or we're going to pull your bonds out, and we'll do it. And yeah, I mean, there's what, 3? There was actually 2 farms It was actually 2 farms. And they were gonna say, not, they had no intention ever to connect those 2. They said, it's not worth it. And we said, no, you're gonna connect them because that's part of the deal. And so forth. So I'm worried that that could happen on one individual, and who's going to monitor that and make sure that every concession, is covered and so forth. And these are heavily subsidized dollars.
So my own personal example of that, and again, forgive me if I've said this already, but so in Maidstone, they ran, I believe it was Cogeco, and my pharmacy is right on the corner of Maiding and Talbot. And the last home that was serviced, there was a farm between myself and that home. I was as far as I know, I'm the only home on Talbot up to Manning from Malden that wasn't serviced. So I called Cogeco and asked them, I was willing to pay for them to lay the cable. I mean, how much can it cost to lay cable? I called them and asked them how much it would cost. They called back and told me they would charge me $300,000 to run cable 200 feet.
Does that make any
$300,000.
sense? Yeah, no, I hear you. I've heard all kinds of stories like that.
Darren, and then Dan and Tanya.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to expand on what Aldo had mentioned there, and I've had a similar experience with one of my remote transmitter locations where I had to call somebody to get services brought in. And the same thing, it's like, well, the nearest service is X number of meters away, 300, 500 meters away. And the price is going to be what it's going to be, $150,000. But as they brought it to your property, they would have passed that other farm. They would have certainly offered services to that farm when they went by on your dollar. So I think that's where the subsidies come in. That'll help, like the municipality, the ISPs, to say, well, you're going to come down this street, this concession, as Mayor McNamara mentioned, that's only going to have 4 properties on it, but we're paying for it. So, or we're paying a percentage, but they're still going to make the money on the other side of it. So I think it's important to pressure them to cover every single property.
I think it was. Oh,
That's
go ahead,
the
Mayor.
right approach.
Yep. Dan, then Councillor Jobin.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to add a bit to this, although I've gone through a similar exercise with Cogeco at about the same time to get connectivity to South Talbot and Malden, we were quoted about $90,000 at that point in time. And one other question with regards to this for Mayor McNamara is the letter that we're intending to direct or recommend to council to write to the government. Is there verbiage in there that would specify that the disbursement of this allotted 37 million it would be in the hands of the county to some degree, or is that even feasible?
What we're trying to tell them is that don't hand the 37 million or whatever, whoever wins the bid, don't hand them, here's the basket and knock yourselves out. And that's the part where I find it's not efficient, doesn't even make sense on a business sense. Anybody with common sense would say, that's not how you do business. I'm glad the administration that comes to us with projects and said, well, we're going to hand them a basket of money and say, well, here, can you go ahead and build it? That doesn't work like that. So what we're trying to do is to tell them that, first of all, they've got the maps, and the maps are outdated. I think Barry showed you that, Sean, I think, and so forth. So to try to convince them that, there's redundancies that were, and they used a lot of the old CRTC mapping. And since then, even our own projects that we did SWIFT in the province of Ontario or in southwestern Ontario, they were showing them as even those as unserviced. And we had just finished them. So you can see they haven't updated the mapping and so forth. So that needs to be done, properly. And that should have been done before you sent out for these reverse RFPs and the request for proposals and so forth. So what we're trying to tell them is that reduce the, not the 37 million, but maybe you should make those in 3 tranches. And so then you can open it up to more people bidding on it.
Thank you. Councillor Jobin, you had your hand up. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, it wouldn't come off. Sorry, my apologies. I'm just going to share, like, I can feel the frustration 110%. And I can only continuously compare it to other services out in the rural community, just like our water and gas. It's similar, mind you, there's a different financial module component to it. But I feel like if back in the day, if residents maybe advocated more so or got on board with the rural water program at that time, they would all be connected. Mind you, they do have their own private services, so they're not without water. But I feel like we have to act on this as soon as we can, because the longer we wait, the costs are going to go up and rules are going to change, and we're going to be in the same predicament in the rural community that they are currently with their water systems. They waited too long. They've waited. Now they're stuck with what they have until there's more funding and it costs more money. My road, gas stops and water stops just up the road. Actually, we just got gas this year, and what propane was costing was crazy. And I still don't have water. And it's just up the road. But rules changed, servicing changed, and prices changed. So if we don't act and advocate now, we're going to be stuck in another rural dead end, like we are in other services from back in the day.
Well, good points, Councillor Jobin, and I think that's why we created this committee, right? To, advocate and, push this issue as much as we can. So, Sean, anything else on unfinished?
I'm looking at the time, so I'm going to run through the rest very quickly. At the last meeting, one of the check boxes was short-term and long-term action plans. So in the unfinished business in the agenda this evening, there are some bullet points. It's not a full formal action plan for either of those, but there are some points there of what we're looking at as we develop those. ISP contacts. So we have had conversations since our last meeting with several of the local ISPs, and all I keep hearing is the more we can do to help them help us. That's the route we should be taking, and the attitude we should be taking. That Tecumseh is open for business and open to helping our residents. And these barriers we talk about, even just going in our right of ways, the permitting process for them to be in our right of ways. We've identified roughly the right of ways we're talking about that have the underserved part of the community. And with that, if you can get into the details of actually where they could run a conduit in those right of ways, maybe that's something we're going to look at next with our internal resources. But they said you're not quite making it shovel ready, but you're showing that you're taking initiative, and the eyebrows are raised by these ISPs that are bidding for these dollars on our behalf. So you want to show them that these projects are tangible, not all areas, but there is some pockets of the areas we're talking about that could be a good resource if they got some subsidies, or could be a good spot for them to focus their energies. So we're going to keep those dialogues going with the ISPs. And I've set up some myself, CWE, Connecting Windsor-Essex. We had Dan Ciricelli on one of our previous meetings. He's been excellent resource in setting up some of these meetings, and we have a few more planned with some other vendors that have skin in the game for these grants. So more to follow on that. Interim report to council. I'm thinking we'll do that Q1. That'll be 4 meetings under our belt. And then, like I said before, council does get these minutes, but do a little dog and pony show of all the good things that the committee has looked at, has debated, has talked about, and where we see the actions going forward. Again, I talked about Connecting Windsor-Essex. Just had a couple notes on that. briefly. Talked to Dan a couple of weeks ago. Oh, the Starlink test. Dan offered to have the Starlink. They've ordered quite a few, I think a dozen of those on behalf of CWE, on behalf of the smart community, which we are a member of. There's a supply chain issue there. So they're promising mid-2022. So that's the update on that. As soon as we get those, if we get one in our hands here to test in Tecumseh, we'll bring that back to the committee and look at candidate spots. Again, CWE working to set up, expand our network of connections, not physical networks, but network with peers that have same interests, like interests in providing bandwidth to our underserved areas. So more to follow on that. Municipally owned infrastructure, we beat that to death earlier in the meeting with the reps from Gray Bar and had that discussion. The new business, we've talked about Infrastructure Ontario and Ontario Connect, so I was going to go over that here with the new announcements in November and Infrastructure Ontario and what that means, but we've gone over that quite a bit tonight, so I'm not going to do that again. The last on the list, Red Out Technologies had reached out since our last meeting, and they are a consulting firm in the GTA that assist with projects on the design side for things that our committee is looking at doing. So they provide engineering services and solutions. They compare supply versus demand. So where is connectivity? Where isn't it? How do we meet? How do the two meet? And how do we fund that? They get stakeholder engagement. So again, raise our profile in this ring with the public, with not only the public, but the private sector on what Tecumseh needs and what they can do to help. They don't actually build networks, but they provide consulting service. So I've just had a preliminary meeting with them on what they do, and they might be something we look at down the road to come back and offer help to our committee. Those are my two on new business that we hadn't talked about since the last meeting, but we'll just leave them as placeholders going forward. Unless I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chair, unless others have more to add to new business. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Dan.
Just through you, Mr. Chair, one quick note here for Sean. In light of the delay for the Starlink there, if I can be of any assistance with your testing, do let me know.
Duly noted. Thank you.
Thank you. And that being said, moving on to new business, would anyone else have any new business to bring up this evening? I see no hands. So our next meeting, Christina, when do we have that tentatively scheduled?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are looking at holding a meeting in the first quarter of 2022. So we would be looking at possibly keeping in with the Wednesdays, which seems to be ideal for all of the member schedules, Wednesday, March the 9th.
Okay. Any objection at this point to that date and time? I don't see any.
I will send out the usual Outlook invitation, of course, and if any members are not available closer to, if they can please just advise so that we can ensure we have quorum.
Okay.
In the meantime, Mr. Chair, I'll certainly keep the committee apprised of what's happening, so that March is it's a ways down the road, and as the answer program evolves, so sort of keep them posted.
Okay, thank you. I do think there's a lot of going on right now in this space with, the government dollars and the tenders that are currently out. So we'll look forward to that information. I think we had a lot of good information shared here tonight. Thank you, Sean, for all the information that you've shared and putting everything together. So I think we had a great meeting tonight, and certainly looking forward to the next one and what may develop between then or now and then. So thank you, everybody, for your time this evening. that being said, I think all we're looking for is a call for adjournment. And before I do that, I will just wish everybody a Merry Christmas. I can't believe there's only 1 week left to school. And then school's out, the kiddies will be home. And a week after that, it will be Christmas. So just want to, wish everybody a safe and happy holiday. Hope everybody stays healthy, enjoys your time with friends, family, and everyone. So that being said, I did see a couple hands go up for adjournment, and I guess I'll just open the floor to see if anybody has anything else they'd like to say as our, last meeting before the new year. Dan, go ahead.
I'll echo the Merry Christmas and let's adjourn at this point.
Yes, be safe, enjoy, be merry, all that good stuff.
Yep.
Merry
Okay.
Christmas.
Thanks, everyone.
Enjoy, everyone. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
So, yeah,
I'll second
adjournment.
that. Oh.
Yep. Yep. Dan and Councillor Jobin, all in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Thank you very much. And everybody have a wonderful evening.